Good evening and welcome back to another episode of What's Your Story? Tonight we are sitting down with David Powell, the technology specialist for the town of Kennebunkport. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
And before we got started, Dave was talking about being on the other side of the camera. Usually that is his job, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what he does for the town of Kennebunkport as we go along. But tonight we are going to hear where you grew up and how you got started.
I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, Alexandria, Virginia in particular.
Okay.
My father was in the Foreign Service, part of the diplomatic corps for a federal agency that no longer exists called the WYS Information Agency.
Okay.
But if you've heard of Voice of America Radio, that originally started with the WYS Information Agency and then went to the Department of State.
Oh, wow.
So he had a position that was related to the State Department. And in the late 60s, he was offered an assignment for 4 years in Tokyo, Japan. So our entire family, my mother, father, and my sister, went and lived in Tokyo for 4 years.
That must have been, how old were you?
I was 5 or 6 when we went and 9 or 10 when we came back.
Was that a blast
So
or was it?
It was a great experience. I think it gave me a taste of what it's like to be a minority because the Japanese culture is very homogeneous. And while I don't remember any overt, racism or disdain for me because I was a gaijin. That's their name for at the time when I had hair, blonde hair, blue-eyed people, foreigner, not Japanese person. I found the Japanese people to be very welcoming, and their culture was fascinating, even for a kid.
Yeah.
And I think it gave me some perspective on what it's like to, not be the mainstream.
Yeah.
So I think that has sort of colored my judgment and I hope my lack of prejudices and accepting of different people and different cultures because I was the different person.
Right. Did you go to an American school there?
Yeah, I
or?
went to an international school,
Oh,
but the
okay.
basic language was English and
Yeah.
Japanese, of course, was a required course as well.
Yeah.
So at the time I could speak a little bit of Japanese, write a little bit of Japanese, read a little bit.
Yeah.
Most of that is gone now.
Yeah. So when you came back, was it tough to re-enter or?
Not really. The school that I went to was pretty rigorous compared to American schools. So I came back at the end of 4th grade, the beginning of 5th grade, and I found 5th grade to be largely a repeat of what I had done in 4th
so you
grade.
were- yeah.
So it was a good school there. And that's not to say anything bad about the American schools. I,
No.
fell right into that afterwards. So from then, so when we came back, when I was in 5th grade through high school, we lived in Alexandria.
And then after that?
After that, I was interested in psychology, and I went to Mary Washington College at the time, they're now the University of Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia,
Okay.
where I got a bachelor's degree in psychology.
Yeah.
And I went on from there and went to graduate school at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and took me 5 years to get a master's degree in psychobiology, which
Wow.
is sort of a specific area of psychology.
Yeah.
I had sort of a crisis of faith when I was in graduate school. I was in a PhD track program. I had to take something called comprehensive exams so that you were eligible to do the PhD portion. I wasn't really enjoying myself, and I was looking to my future saying, what am I going to do when I have a PhD in psychology? And I came to the conclusion that I would be what I was doing was experimental psychology with animals. It was behavioral psychology, so we weren't cutting up rat brains or anything like that. But it was almost entirely research. It wasn't a practical clinical application. I wasn't
Yeah.
really interested in that. So I came to the conclusion that I would be getting a PhD and then being a professor someplace and teaching kids the same thing that I had learned, kind of in an endless cycle, and that really didn't appeal to me too much.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
at that point, I'd been using computers to control the experimental events, collect the data, analyze the data, and said, well, I'm not interested in pursuing my PhD, but I've been using computers, so maybe I'll do something with computers. So while I was still in grad school, I got a position as the assistant director of a division of Save the Children that was called Child Care Solutions, and it was a computerized system that had information about child care providers in the metro Atlanta
wow.
area. And it had, this was the late 80s, so,
Yeah.
you didn't have Google Maps and all this
Right.
high-tech stuff, but they did have a sort of primitive map with coordinates, and you would have a mother or father call into the agency and say, I live here and I work here. I'm interested in Montessori care somewhere
Yeah.
between the two. The counselor would plug that into the computer system, into the database, and it would spit out a list of possibly appropriate
Yeah.
child care for that child or children. So that's kind of how I got into
That's neat.
computers through the back door. I was a computer lab aide when I was in college. So at that time it was. What was it? It was before the Macintosh, so it was Apple SE computers. No, I don't remember. I don't think that's right. But anyway, older Apple computers. So I'd had an interest in computers all along, though I haven't really taken any classes. Someone once asked me what was the most important computer class you took towards your career, and I said 11th grade typing class.
Yeah, there you go. I know.
That's the way it was
And
back
I think
then.
a lot of times the way to learn is just by sitting down and, trial by fire. Sometimes you can figure stuff out
Right.
on, in different ways just by, sort of, wait a minute, how did that happen? And then you can always go back and
That's certainly true for me.
see.
'Cause
Yeah, me
you
too.
learn by doing. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, instruction can be helpful to a certain extent
Yeah.
or give you a framework, but
Yeah.
I don't really get it until
Yeah.
I do it and make mistakes and figure out why that didn't
Right,
work
right.
and do it
I
again.
love troubleshooting, and you do that now.
Yes.
How did you get here to Kennebunkport?
So I certainly cannot call myself a Mainer by any stretch. My
okay.
children are Mainers.
You're here now.
But but I have a long family history. On my mother's side of the family, my mother's father, to be particular, his last name was Gould, and right across the street here is Alexander Gould's house. He was
Right.
my 4 times great-grandfather and a clipper ship captain in Kennebunkport. So he and those that came after him, his children, grandchildren, etc., have lived in Kennebunkport up until my grandfather. My grandfather died in 1967, and at the time was living in the family homestead, which is on North Street here. Folks might know it as the Moshemer House. The Moshemers lived there for many years and had a rug hooking studio there.
Right.
And so when my grandfather passed away, my mother and father were adults. We were living in the DC area, had no plans to move here. So my grandmother, now a widow, couldn't keep up the big house. I think it was 4,000 square feet, including the barn. So she decided to subdivide the lot because the house was on one side of the lot. She divided the lot down the middle and built the house that we live in now on the other side of the lot.
Yeah.
So she lived in that house for 20 years. She passed away in the 99, 98, in the late 90s. And she gave the house to my sister and myself jointly.
Okay.
At the time, I was living in Durham, North Carolina, and my sister was in St. Paul, Minnesota. She had no plans to move to Maine. I didn't have anything particular tying me to North Carolina, and we had mutually decided no family drama. I'm sort of the apologist for the core nuclear family that doesn't have a lot of strife and backstabbing. The whole family got together, my parents and us, and decided that either one of us was going to live in the house or we were going to sell the house. This is long before VRBO and Airbnb and all that stuff. And any experience we had in either renting or renting, being the renter who's in the house or the one who owns the house renting it out, didn't work well when you were out of state. So we decided we were going to make that decision. Someone would move there. So I said, okay, I'll move to Maine. So my sister got dibs on the antiques in the house, and I moved into the house in it was May Day 2001. So we've been here for 22 years.
And how did you meet your wife, Michelle? Was it in school?
It was very scandalous back in the day.
Ooh, do
we met
tell.
on Match.com online.
Oh, okay.
So I was in North Carolina, knew that I would be moving to Maine, but I wasn't going to move to Maine until either I A, got a job in Maine, or B, sold my house in North Carolina.
Okay.
So selling the house happened first. It still took a year and a half at the time. The market was quite different then. Sold my house, and but I put in my profile on Match.com that I would be living in Kennebunkport. So my wife is from Dover, New Hampshire, Dover, Somersworth area. So she saw my profile and sent me a message, and
the rest is history.
Yeah, so we did have a good 6 months or a year that we called the funding the Midway Airlines phase of our relationship. Every 2 or 3 weeks, she would fly down to Durham and stay the weekend with me, or I would come up to this area and stay with her.
So your kids were born here?
Yes. So.
And school system, I remember them well, walking by on their way home from school. Your daughter Janelle was always in here, is such a pleasure. And now she's getting ready to graduate.
Yes, she is.
Which is just incredible.
Yes. So she's gone through the RSU 21 schools that are formerly MSAD system here in town and in Kennebunk for her entire education. So both my kids went to KCS, to Consolidated, and my son is now 12. He's in the middle school. He's in 6th grade. And
hard to believe.
And Janelle is graduating this year.
Yeah, wow. So and you have a semi-new job with the town.
Yes. So I started in December, mid-December.
Okay. So what's a typical day for you over there?
It's more moving around than I realized that it would be, though that's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
So there are several buildings scattered around town. I mean, we've got Public Works, we've got the Parks and Rec, we've got the police station and health department and town hall. So I go as needed if someone's having a computer issue or a printer issue or an equipment issue. One thing I really like about this job is, as opposed to previous jobs, is that I'm getting a large variety of, so my position is a technology specialist. It's not just computers.
Right.
So the town recently had a new phone system put in, and I oversaw the delivery of that. I didn't have any particular technical knowledge, but I acted sort of as a project manager, working with the vendor for the phone system and working with other parties. For instance, at the police department, they have a system that records the phone calls. So we have to make that recording system work with the phone system, and there are a lot of moving parts to put together. So
now, do you get involved with some of the equipment that are in the cars? Because that's all.
I have not so far. We do have a technical contractor that the town has worked with for some years, and they're very familiar with those systems. There are also a couple of servers in town hall to run the financial system, for collecting payments and that type of thing. So I'm sort of the first line.
Yeah.
But if it's beyond my expertise, as with the police system video, then they're still there. They're not as prominent as they used to be. I can do a fair amount of that stuff,
Yeah.
but I haven't encountered very much with the systems in the police cars, et cetera.
Yeah, because I would think
I'm sure
that's
I'll be learning
I'm
more
sure
as
you
time goes
probably
on.
will be. It would be good to have the backup.
Yeah.
But it's just such a whole other animal
It is.
now, with all the things that are in their car, and then they've got, all the gear.
They've got the cameras and all that.
Yeah, so I've been to a few meetings over at the fire station, and I see you in the room there, the technology room. How does all of that work? So through the pandemic, you had to take care of people online, asking questions whenever there was if you could tell us a little bit about that process.
Michael Davis and I have actually been doing the AV for the town for almost 15 years. We started both together when Larry Mead was town manager.
Okay.
And I think it was actually in the local newspaper, there was or maybe it was online, for a position doing the audio-visual stuff, recording meetings. And so I approached Larry and said I'd be interested in doing this. I had a full-time job besides, but this was in the evenings and it wasn't that many hours a week.
Yeah.
And he asked if I would mind sharing the position with Michael, which I gladly did. And he had a lot of experience in TV. So my experience, I was more as a hobbyist. I'm an amateur photographer, and I've always enjoyed things like playing with stereo systems. Consider myself a bit of an audiophile. I was a DJ and a program manager for my college radio station back in the day. So I just had that interest and enjoyed that type of thing. So I thought this would be a fun, boutique kind of job to do on the side. So we've been doing that, like I said, ever since, I don't remember if it was 2008 or 2009, but it was right around Halloween that we started.
Wow.
And we've been doing that since, and I think we work very well together because one of us isn't always available. So it's great that we have two of us for a little bit of depth of the bench, so to speak, so that we can cover more meetings. So anyway, we've been doing this along, and things went pretty smoothly, and then the entire world stopped in March of 2020, and we had to pivot at that point. We did have some people may remember Skype for doing meetings or video phone calls or whatever you want to call it. We did have a Skype box that we used only very occasionally if someone wanted to join a meeting that way. But at that time, the state law was you cannot be a voting member of a board and participate remotely. You must be in the room.
Yeah.
Guess what? They changed that real quick.
They sure did.
Everybody did, not just Maine. I started investigating Skype and seeing, can I get more than one person using this box? And I researched online, and it's like, oh no, just buy another box for every remote participant that you have, and they're $1,000 each.
Oh my God!
I said, there's no way we can do this.
Oh, no.
So we, like most of the world, arrived at Zoom as a way to do this. So we did have to buy a piece of equipment, a bridge they call it, to get the cameras in the room hooked into one participant or the meeting holder, the webinar holder, the host they call it, in Zoom. But we actually didn't have to do that to start out with because everybody was remote when the pandemic first hit.
Right.
So we just had to have Skype running on a computer that was hooked into the broadcast, which we had, and then all the participants participated via Zoom. That actually was easier than it is now. And the reason is because it was all Zoom. So in the old days, it was all in person.
Okay.
And then during the pandemic, it was all Zoom.
All Zoom.
And then as we emerged from the pandemic in the spring, summer of 2022, I guess it was it just last year? Wow. It seems like it was. Anyway, when that happened, then we had the need to do what we call hybrid meetings, where you have both people in the room and people remotely participating. And it's different when they're just watching on TV or they're even watching a video stream and not participating. But we had the mandate that we had to make them able to participate in two-way communication. So that's when we had to get the bridge and put it together. And it basically doubles our work. I mean, we
Right.
had to do all the work that Mike is doing here right now, with the, sort of the more traditional thing of controlling the cameras, making sure the sound levels are good, and you have to have someone that is running the Zoom meeting. So we picked the Zoom webinar format because you have more control.
Right.
We've probably all heard in the news how misbehaving people were
Right.
doing nasty things with what they were presenting during a meeting. With the meeting, you can't control that. I mean, eventually they got to the point where you could kick people off as the host. But with a webinar, it's much more controlled. You
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
the general audience where they have to raise their hand if they want to speak, and I manually say, okay, now you can speak, and turn their microphone on.
Yeah.
Or you have panelists who can present things as well as being
Right.
able to see them
Yeah.
and hear them.
Yeah.
So it's been an evolution, it's been an education, but I think we're finally
Yeah, and
starting to hit our stride
You
with
all
it.
have to learn that really fast. And then when somebody wants to do a presentation, how do you share the screen? How do you get there? And I found even this last year at the budget meetings, you were able to, show people the PowerPoints and the budgets that people had. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's a lot of moving parts,
Yeah.
and usually during the meeting there's a pretty good flow, but
Yep.
we're extremely busy at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting.
Right, right.
So,
And that's probably going to be the way it is do you ever
Yeah.
see it just going back to in person?
no,
I don't either.
I think the genie's out of the bottle, and there are some people who, understandably, who are, if they're older and they're frailer health, they still have concerns
Yeah.
about COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, probably my best friend who's in Boston, he's about my age, he's about 60. He just got COVID 2 days ago. So, and he seems to be fine, doing all right. It's like a severe cold for him, but
Yeah.
there are others who,
Yeah.
it could still be a very bad situation. So
Yeah.
I think there's going to be continuing to be that demand, especially considering the demographic of Kennebunkport,
Right.
that people want to be able to not just remotely view, but remotely participate in these meetings.
And I think it's good, especially if maybe you have two homes and you're in Florida in the winter, but you want to stay connected and be a voting member, something. And it's nice that you can be able to do that. You don't feel like you're
We find that in particular with the Beach
catching up.
Advisory Committee. For the folks that are at Goose
Yeah.
Rocks Beach, a lot of them
Yeah.
are here in the summer, but they're away during the winter, but they still want to have their meetings to
Yeah.
plan for what is going on with the beach
Right,
for the
right.
next summer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's good that we can do that.
So when you're not at work,
Mm-hmm.
what do you and your family like to do?
Well,
I see
with it-
little trips here and there posted
Yes.
on Facebook, and I always get. Always makes me smile when you're all together heading off for an adventure.
something that we've done, I guess, less and less as a family, but we did more as a family when we started out, is I'm a member of a social group called Minis of Maine. I have a Mini Cooper, which I love to drive. They're fun little cars. And I bought my first new car, which was a Mini Cooper, back in early 2016. And then I sold it for a song to my daughter 2 years ago because she was itching for a car, and I dreaded the thought of trying to vet a good used car, and I went, hey, I know a good used car that's had only one owner and who's taking care of it, my car.
Bingo.
So I sold her my car and then took on a car payment once again and got another Mini for myself. So we're a 2-Mini family, and in this Minis of Maine group, it's headed up by a guy, Matt, who lives up in the Augusta area, and he goes out and maps out drives. And so we all get together. It's not racing street rods or anything like that. It's just people who are Mini enthusiasts, and he'll plan out a whole route. So we meet at usually it's a gas station someplace, and it's usually on the mid coast. We'll meet someplace at a particular time. We use little radios to keep in contact, so we can say there's a guy walking his dog on the left up here, so everybody knows to look out for him, and make sure nobody misses a turn or whatever. But he prints maps, he prints directions, and hands them out to everyone. And so you go driving around for an hour and a half, and then he plans a place where you can stop at a mini mart and get a snack and gas up if you need to, and then drive around for a couple more hours, and then stop for lunch, and then do it in the afternoon. So it's usually a
That's
whole day
great.
event. So we haven't done that as much recently because members of his family have had health issues, but that's something that we've enjoyed doing together. Though I think my daughter and my wife have been less enthusiastic about that recently. Though my son has been with me more recently. We also the kids and I like to go for short hikes around in the area. Janelle really likes hiking. Michelle has issues with her knees, so she's not as enthusiastic about doing that. But I like going not even with minis, just exploring Maine. There's so much coastline and so many places to explore that we'll go do that type of thing.
That's great. Can I ask a question about your house?
Sure.
Solar panels?
They're solar tubes, so it's thermal solar, not photovoltaic solar. So it's not generating electricity; it's generating heat.
Oh.
So don't get me started here. Back in 2008, remember when the oil prices spiked really badly? It was like $4.35 a gallon, which is probably what it is now.
Probably close, yes.
For number 2 heating oil. We were paying almost $800 a month to the oil vendor 10 months out of the year on their level payment plan to afford heating oil. And no, it wasn't a particularly efficient heater. It was original with a house in '68. So I said, okay, I should replace the heating system. Not that it was failing, just that it wasn't efficient and we were burning a lot of oil. And I decided to try and go with some type of a more environmentally friendly system of doing that. So what I ended up doing was purchasing a hybrid system that has 3 heat sources. So it has these solar tubes on the roof that you mentioned that you've seen. So it's propylene glycol that circulates through those tubes, and then it goes down to the basement, and we have a thermal storage tank that stores the heat.
Okay.
It's filled with water, and people think that water circulates. It doesn't actually circulate. You think of it as a box of rocks that's holding the heat.
Okay.
So the pipe is circulating the propylene glycol down, and that heat gets stored in the tank, a super insulated tank in the basement. It's big. It's 900 gallons of water, so I think it's 6 feet wide by 6 feet long by 4 feet high.
Yeah.
It's like a big box, a big table. And so we have the solar that's putting heat in there. We also have a wood boiler. So we use cordwood, so it's not a wood stove that, this room is cold, so I'm going to build a fire in the stove. It's a boiler that heats the entire house. So this whole system was cut into the existing baseboard heat for the house. So using the existing thermostats and all that. And then the third heat source is a propane boiler.
Okay.
Because the regulations, I guess it's state regulations, are that you have to have a conventional heat source if you have something like solar or a wood boiler, which is perhaps more ecologically friendly, but considered possibly not less reliable. I haven't had any problems with it, but anyway, so we have 3 heat sources, and then we have the baseboard heat, so when we need heat in the house it's called for, or for domestic hot water.
That is so great. And your gas and your oil bill is
0, because we have no oil. So,
that is amazing.
So I'm paying a lot less for cordwood. I use between 6 and 8 cords of wood a year, depending upon how cold the winter is, and paying a lot less for that, and I'll get maybe 1 or 2 tanks of propane during the year. I get lazy in the summer and don't build fires in the wood boiler. So the solar provides a good amount in terms of just heating the water for domestic hot water, but it's not enough to provide meaningful amount of heat for the house in the wintertime. So
now, if I wanted to do something like that at my house, how would I go about? Is there a local vendor that you?
I went to Revision Energy. I believe they were the ones that did the photovoltaic charging panels on the fire station.
On the fire station, yeah.
So they're big into that. If I couldn't afford it at the time. The PV solar is big now. People using heat pumps or mini splits with the PV system to generate the power. And that seems to work quite well. But the amazing thing was the cost of that has dropped 80% in the past decade.
Wow.
So back when I did this, I couldn't afford the PV setup. So that's why I went with a more conventional
That's really cool, though.
setup. So the wood boilers are apparently pretty common in Europe. They're way ahead. In fact, the boiler that we have is made in Europe. I think it's Dutch or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So you're getting ready to have a graduate.
yes.
And where is she heading off to?
She's going to Bowdoin College.
That is
In
awesome.
Brunswick. So.
And she's gonna. Does she know what she's gonna study?
Oh
or-
yes, she's been a math whiz for years and years. So
Yeah.
she was in the GT math program at Consolidated,
Yeah.
and she had a great teacher in middle school who challenged the kids well, but also taught them their limits. Don't
Yeah.
go crazy trying to solve this one problem. Work on it for 20 minutes. If you can't figure it out, stop. Come to me. We'll talk about it. But
Great
the girl
approach.
loves calculus.
Oh, that's
and
good.
So she's taken courses at USM online because it was
Yep.
during the pandemic at
Yep.
that time. So she's taken multivariate calculus, I think,
that's great.
3 times. And the past 2 years at the high school, she's been TAing. She's been teaching the other kids
wow.
this stuff.
Good for her.
That's really
Well,
her forte.
Please pass on congratulations to her
I
from
most certainly
us.
will. Thank you.
It's really exciting to see, one of our younger students that, or one of our younger patrons, I should say, that is, it's just such a pleasure to see them grow up.
I still tear up a
So-
little bit when I go to Consolidated School, and there's a picture of the Blue Ribbon Award ceremony where
Yeah.
where all the kids
Yeah.
lined up, where Senator Collins came to give the award,
Yeah.
and there's my little kindergartner Janelle sitting in the front row.
That is so great.
Yeah.
Do you see changes coming with the technology that you're doing? Are you on the lookout for something new? Like if the town, that's the one thing that I find that I feel like I'm sort of like just staying in the water. I'm not in the boat. And but do you see stuff coming up that's going to change or?
It's hard to tell in different industries, and being a municipality is different. I've worked in IT, but in the medical sector, in the pharmaceutical sector, because I've worked for a medical transcription company. I've worked for a major pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
Worked for a financial services company, and different companies are at different phases in terms of their adoption and perhaps their concern about cyber criminals. That's always a concern.
Yeah,
The big thing
yeah.
now, 10, 15 years ago, it was disaffected youth in Russia who were trying to see how far they could make a virus spread around the world. But it really wasn't doing that much serious damage. And then other people got into it, and I guess just for malicious glee decided what they could do to mess up people's computers.
Right.
Now it's kind of gone, to mafia style. You have these in some cases it's state-run actors. In other
Yeah.
cases it's these other hacker groups, and they're in it for the money now.
They're in it for the money,
What's
exactly.
really big now is ransomware. So they get into a computer system by whatever means. Usually it's because someone accidentally clicked on something in an email that they shouldn't have, and what they do is they encrypt all the files on your servers. And then they leave you a message saying, we've encrypted all your files. If you want them back, we'll give you the decryption key. Send us $50,000 of Bitcoin or whatever it is. And it's a real problem. And, municipalities in Maine have been hit by this. There was an instance that I was made aware of back in 2018. The city of Atlanta was paralyzed for weeks because of this. And you hire a reputable vendor to try and get you out of it.
Yep.
And in some places they pay the ransom, and that's taking a chance. They might act in good faith and unlock your files, and they might not. So it is a serious concern. So that's sort of the dark side.
Yeah.
To lighten the mood a little bit. I see potential, and I also see danger with what everybody's talking about these days. It seems like this year, which is the AI.
AI.
Chat GPT and all that. And So there are concerns in education. My daughter is one of the editors of the school newspaper, the high school newspaper, and she did an article about ChatGPT. And she wrote the first paragraph of the article using ChatGPT to write it.
Okay.
So there's this introduction, and then she says, "I fooled you." ChatGPT actually wrote that first paragraph, and it's scary.
It
how
is very
good it
scary. Yeah.
So just
Yep.
this week, we were at the town office. My coworker Hope and I, who does Hope does the communications, and I do some of the communications and the technology side. We were tasked with looking at AI and how that might be able to assist us in communications.
Okay.
So there's a lot of good potential there, but there's also
Yeah.
danger there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I have an app on my phone you can do it, or you can go to a website and do it
Yeah,
and say,
yeah.
I was trying to explain some history to my daughter the other day, and I was lacking for details. It was about the end of World War I and the rise of Hitler in World War II. And so I tried to explain some things that I found myself lacking, and I said, "Hey, let's try this." So I said, "ChatGPT, write me a 1,000-word essay on the end of World War I and the rise of Hitler in World War II," and it did it, in a matter of a few seconds. So and it's very readable. Not everything is correct about it, but it's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
It uses all the stuff that's on the internet to
Yeah.
combine and make a very readable narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're doing it for I don't know about probably video and pictures now.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah.
I use Photoshop as a tool, and Adobe keeps popping up and saying, "Hey, enhance your creativity. Use AI to, make a picture." So I guess, I could say, make me a picture of a panda surfing in Hawaii or something, and it would do it. And I guess that
Yeah.
might have some potential in a good sense, but yeah.
Yeah. Definitely pros and cons.
Yeah.
So, thank you for all you do for us.
you're most
Thank you
welcome.
for what you do for the town, and being a member of our community and neighbor right around the corner.
Yes,
So
most definitely.
it's been a pleasure to hear more about more about you and how you started. I had no idea that you were in Japan, and so this is all really good stuff.
And with a degree in psychology,
With
I
a
don't
degree-
use it all.
That's okay. You do. You do. You just don't know you do. So, and thank you all for being here tonight. And we hope to see you next time on another episode of What's Your Story?